The character action genre had been going the way of the dodo, but thankfully, 2025 came to the rescue with 2 titles in the genre, the upcoming Ninja Gaiden 4 and the recently released Lost Soul Aside. Lost Soul Aside won't be winning any awards this year, but that doesn't mean it's not a fun time. The game is insanely deep with its combat, with Kaiser constantly unlocking new attacks and abilities to mix and match with, and the multiple weapon types and tons of bosses give you more than enough reason to try different things out. But Lost Soul Aside is a successor to many other games. It doesn't do a ton that's new, but what it tries to do works. Today we're going to check out a bunch of games that feel a whole lot like Lost Soul Aside, and they're going to be coming from a variety of genres.
Lost Soul Aside was trying to be this generation's Final Fantasy, but something got lost in the sauce. Although you can see glimpses of brilliance, it ultimately falls short. If you want full-on character action-style gaming in a long, huge-budget RPG, well, enter Final Fantasy XVI. Kaiser and Clive play incredibly similarly in terms of transformations, swordplay, and overall combat. I'll say Final Fantasy XVI doesn't quite hit the highs of Lost Soul Aside when it comes to the combat, but it makes up for it in many other areas. This game has incredible voice acting, jaw-dropping visuals, and boss fights that have to be seen to be believed. It also has a great story, and the main complaint I really have about it is that the exploration and challenge just don't do enough for me.
Devil May Cry 5 was a revival of the action genre in 2019, but it has been pretty dormant since. Lost Soul Aside draws a ton from the series that more or less created the hack-and-slash game, believe it or not. For example, the transformation in Lost Soul Aside is very similar to the Devil Trigger move made famous by Devil May Cry. As far as pure, kick-ass action goes, Devil May Cry 5 has no equal. It's effortlessly stylish, deep as hell in terms of weapons and combos, and possibly the best-looking combat there is. Lost Soul Aside fans will love this one, as the story doesn't matter all that much, and the focus is clearly on looking pretty and feeling cool while you fight, and while some of the story is a bit ridiculous and there are some cringeworthy things like Dante's hat weapon, overall it's about as good as it gets for this kind of game.
Bayonetta is the sister series to Devil May Cry, so for Lost Soul Aside, I guess that would make it the cousin series. Either way you slice it, the crazy over-the-top attacks in Lost Soul Aside borrow a ton from Bayonetta, and there is no shame in that, because Bayonetta is one of the best action games of all time. The story is a half-serious look at angels, demons, and witches, but the reason why you play is for the combat. Bayonetta feels endlessly stylish and hilarious, but most importantly, it's a ton of fun to play. You'll be attacking enemies with your hair, breakdancing while shooting guns out of your shoes, and that's just the basic kit you get to play with here. If you can take its ridiculous tone as it is, you'll have a ton of fun here with this game and its sequels, but be ready for a challenge.
Wets is a forgotten gem from the era of edgy 2000s video games, and it's a game that barely takes itself seriously while having some great action gameplay. It's clearly inspired by movies like Kill Bill, and that's great because we never actually got a competent game to go with that amazing franchise. Much like Lost Soul Aside, this is a fight first, ask later kind of game, as the story is pretty awful and in poor taste at times. All of that goes away when you're blasting and shooting through waves of enemies in style. There is a sort of retro-type filter to all this on-screen chaos that makes the whole game feel like a Robert Rodriguez flick that missed the cut. It's not as deep combat one as some of the other games on this list, but it's one of the only character action games starring a woman, which at the time was pretty novel, and we want to give that some love here.
When we're talking about character action games, Kratos may just be the Michael Jordan of his time. If you like slashing enemies to bits, over-the-top boss battles, endless action, and chaos on screen, Kratos is who you go to. I'm not talking about this tempered, wise, and restrained Kratos we've gotten in recent years. I'm talking about Kratos in his heyday, when you could jump. Kratos in God of War 3 is just a machine of a character, hell-bent on revenge, killing gods left and right, ripping off heads, slicing enemies to pieces, just an all-out animal, and it's glorious to behold, when you're behind the controls. It's not the longest game, but you will get more than your bang for your buck here, as you've got a bunch of weapons to play with, some great voice acting, and this story is a twisting and turning journey with a fantastic conclusion to Kratos' first big journey in the gaming world.
Nier Automata is one of the best action RPGs of all time, and the combat is actually some of the best you can find in that genre. It is more like a character action game in its gameplay, which helped cast its net a bit wider than it would have been otherwise. The story is among the best a video game has ever seen, and the characters have all become iconic by this point. The combat, though, is very much like what you get in Lost Soul Aside. You have a deep bag of moves to play with, and your arsenal is constantly expanding, as your pawn functions much like Arena does in Lost Soul Aside, and can grant you various abilities and attacks throughout the game. It also has some amazing boss fights, and the multiple playthroughs give you a reason to keep coming back to see the true ending of the story. 2B and Kaiser look identical in battle at times, and I think weapon weight is something both games do a lot better than most of their contemporaries.
Metal Gear Rising takes Metal Gear's Raiden out of the shadows and into a cyborg ninja suit, where stealth is no longer an option. And it doesn't need to be, because you are armed to the teeth with a cybernetic sword, rocket launchers, and more, as you take on cyborg soldiers, mechs, helicopters, and even politicians on one absolutely crazy adventure. The big selling point is definitely the custom cutting system, where you can literally slice your enemies into tiny pieces if you so choose. Doing so gives you a health boost, so it's definitely worth your while. The boss fights here are huge standouts too, with some devilishly tough fights against some of the Metal Gear canon's most ridiculous and over-the-top enemies to date. If you miss the non-stop slashing madness that Lost Soul Aside can provide, Metal Gear Rising is a perfect substitute.
Ninja Gaiden 2 Black was shadow dropped in January 2025, and immediately it was clear why this game is so fondly remembered. It's just a bloody good time. You play as the iconic Ryu Hayabusa, and you'll be armed with a variety of awesome weapons and fight through countless enemies throughout your journey. The combat is absolutely fantastic here, and even though the game initially released in 2008, it still stands up today. The swordplay is phenomenal, and the enemies are downright ferocious, but you've got an insane amount of moves to counter their attacks with, and the bosses in this game are some of the most fun to fight in any game period. Ninja Gaiden 4 has a ton to live up to, so hopefully we can see a return to form for this series, as Ninja Gaiden 2 Black is an all-timer.
Scarlet Nexus is a hidden gem of an action RPG, and while I've played through it multiple times, I still couldn't tell you what the hell the story was about. It's so obscure and strange, but it's oddly compelling, and though I don't get it, maybe you will. Thankfully, the combat is there to support it all. Fighting in Scarlet Nexus is excellent, with a unique mix of abilities and psychic powers. You get some very cool looking moves, including one of the more original finishing attacks, where you essentially use your mind to completely obliterate your opponents when the move is charged. It's got that same type of arena combat Lost Soul Aside has as well, and I'd say the bosses are right on par. I do like the characters here quite a bit more, since the voice acting is actually pretty great as well. You have two different characters to play with, making the journey different each time, so you can definitely get a good amount of gameplay out of this one, and it consistently is a fun time throughout.
I like to describe Lost Soul Aside as big, stupid fun. You know what else qualifies for that description? God Hand. It's a game where the story matters little and it's all about the action, which is yet to be surpassed in melee-focused games. The controls are a bit jarring at first, but remember, this is PS2 era gaming, and controls just sucked in general. Once you get the hang of that, the game is endlessly fun. You have a ton of moves to use in combat, which use environmental destruction and anime-like disregard for human physics to completely punt these enemies into the sun. God Hand is crazy challenging, but the combat has so much depth and fun to experiment with that you won't feel an ounce of boredom during its runtime, and you'll just be hungering for the next enemy to test your attacks on. It's got a twisted sense of humor, which surely won't be for everybody, but if you can unclutch your pearls for a moment, you'll definitely be experiencing one of the more underrated games from yesteryear.